written out. Okay, does that work? Can you guys hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, I can hear it now. Okay, John. Ready? Okay, hello everybody. Hello everybody. So, welcome to Budget Day. Hold on, I brought up the wrong one. Sorry. Can you not hear me? Okay, hold on a second. Okay. Budget Day 20. Crap. Budget Day program. I'm sorry. I was all prepared. I printed this out. And if you could tell me where it is. Are you talking? I'm just mumbling. Running, no, that's not it. I'm sorry, I lost my I lost my speech. Okay, I'll have to wing it. Okay, hi, so everybody, it's great to see you here. Welcome to Budget Day 2024. This is the first Budget Day that's in person since 2019. So I'm really excited to be here, really excited to see you all. So I just want to say a little bit about some things like how I got here. So in 2019, the last time we had Budget Day in person, that was my first Budget Day. I had been newly elected, but not yet seated to my neighborhood council. Actually, so I ran, and it was a really tough race for the seat, but I won. Okay, well, really, I ran unopposed, but the tough race story is better. So anyway, so I was in a mode of trying to learn everything I could learn. I wanted to learn everything, and I was at home, and in my Facebook news feed, a graphic came across for Budget Day. What's Budget Day? What are the budget advocates? I look into it. It's like, oh, learn about the budget. Yes. I want to do this because I knew that the budget was the most important thing, because if something's going to get done, it's because it's budgeted. And if it's not going to get done, it's because it's not budgeted. So I came to my first Budget Day. And I mean, I can remember Jack Humphreyville talking about the spaghetti is going to hit the fan, and in 2024, it surely has, right? And I can remember Jacob Wexler from the CAO office talking about the budget in a way that I, who knew nothing, could understand, right? And I can remember Paul Koretz, not stopping at the end of his time, and the budget advocates being frantic trying to get him to stop talking, but he wouldn't. So, I remember all these things, and I was so inspired. I was so inspired that I got involved. I went to the very next Budget Advocates meeting right after Budget Day, and have been gone to almost every meeting since. Okay, sometimes I'm on vacation, but I really feel like getting involved with the budget, getting involved with the budget advocates. It's a way to make a difference. You really can make a difference. And I'm really glad that I did that. And I'm hoping that Budget Day today will inspire some of you in the way that it inspired me in 2019, and that you will get involved if you are not already. Before I go, I want to say something about the budget. So, all of our elected officials are walking around and they're talking about how great a job they did balancing the budget under such difficult circumstances. Okay, so I have a few things to say about this. One, They have to balance the budget. They have no choice. That's just the way it is. 2, we're in these economic conditions with the city's budget because of choices that our elected officials made. And that's what put us here. For example, we have new labor agreements for the LAPD and the civilian workers, but for the most part, the LAPD labor agreement really caused the city budget to tank, and so what's done is done. But when they say, this is number 3, when they say the budget is balanced, they are missing 2 important words. The budget is balanced for now. They leave out the for now, because while we've completed the LAPD budget, while we've completed the civilian the civilian workers budget, we have not completed the LAFD budget. And the thing is that we will become in worse deficit when we have that budget, when we get that agreement in place, because we don't plan for these events. We know that it's coming. We know the labor agreements are going to expire. We know we're going to have to give raises, but we don't budget for those raises. And so that's why every time a labor agreement expires, we go further into deficit. So that's what I'm going to say about the budget. Other than that, I'm just going to say I'm really, really thrilled to see all of you here. I hope you enjoy Budget Day today. It was a pleasure for the budget advocates to put it together for you. And thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Paul Krikorian, President of the City Council, and I want to thank all of you for participating in today's Budget Day. And thank you for your service to the city through the Neighborhood Council movement and through the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocates. You're going to be hearing a lot of information about the budget today. You'll be hearing from the chair of our Budget, Finance, and Innovation Committee, Councilmember Bob Blumenfield, who has done an extraordinary job, as have the other members of the committee, in preparing the budget for the coming year. And I want to thank him very much for the hard work that he's done to ensure that we have fiscal stability in this year's budget. I also want to just say that I served as budget chair for over a decade. And one of the first things that I did when I became budget chair was to invite the Neighborhood Council budget advocates into our hearings as full participants, in the same way that the city administrative officer makes presentations, in the same way that our department heads make presentations to the committee. We wanted to ensure that the Neighborhood Council budget advocates had that opportunity as well to make a full presentation in the budget committee. And over the years, you've produced many really valuable white papers and provided input into so many policy recommendations and budget recommendations, many of which have been implemented over the years. And I thank you for all that. But I also want to encourage you going forward to also look at our entire city charter, because thanks to the effort that we initiated after I became council president, we will have a full Charter Reform Commission process beginning early next year, where you will have the opportunity to weigh in fundamental changes to the city's charter in how we handle our budget, how we do finances for the city. So this is a really important opportunity for direct engagement by the neighborhood councils, by the budget advocates, in making transformational change to the governing document of this city through the Charter Reform Commission. So I really encourage you to continue to be involved in that process as well. In the meantime, have a great budget day. Thanks very much for your participation.
Hi, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful, okay. Well, good morning and happy Saturday. Thank you for all being here on a Saturday. Really speaks to your commitment to the city and the communities you serve. My name is Carmen Chang, and I am your new general manager for Empower LA. Again, thank you all for coming to Budget Day. As Kay mentioned, this is the first Budget Day where we're coming together in person since 2019. And that has been some time. It's been real hard for everybody to plan events, right, online, and finally now in person. So we're just so thrilled to have you come back as a collective to City Hall and City Hall chambers. And I'm really excited to meet everybody here today. I would like to thank the budget advocates who are working with my team to put this event together every year. For folks who've been here and involved every year, or for folks coming here for the first time, including myself, you can tell that this is truly a labor-intensive effort as well as a labor of love. So really, just want to thank you all for your hard work. Also, welcome to the budget representatives. I want to thank the Neighborhood Council, all the board members that are here in attendance, as well as members of the public for attending. Want to also give a special thank you and shout out to our Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. We've got Commissioner Atkinson, Commissioner Waters, and Commissioner Eppenhart, so thank you. Our team here at Empower LA, I'm seeing a lot of folks here, coming in as well on a Saturday to put this together, so thank you. As well as our elected officials who are here today, and that includes Controller Mejia, Council Member Bloomingfield, and others, and really also a huge shout out to the main organizers of this event this year, Kay Hartman, who you just saw, as well as Glenn Bailey, who celebrated his birthday yesterday. So a special thank you and a happy birthday. So folks may know that the annual budget day was originally created by Mayor James Hahn, who helped implement Section 909 of the city charter. This section tells us that each neighborhood council may present to the mayor and the council an annual list of priorities for the city's budget. The mayor shall inform certified neighborhood councils of the deadline for submission, so your input may be considered in a timely fashion. Budget Day is an opportunity for you to not only learn about the budget and its processes, but also to have an input on it as well. I mean, your voice really does matter here, which is why we're gathered together. It really does create the space for engagement, and I really encourage those of you who are doing this for the first time or really learning more to get involved, and for those who are already been involved in the process to, really thank you for your efforts, and please to continue to be engaged and to, take all the new folks that are interested under your wing. This is really just a wonderful place to get started, to learn about the city budget. Empower LA looks forward to hearing the outcome of today's event. I know that it's going to be a Budget 101, there as well as sessions today and some elections. We're really excited to see what the future brings for budget advocacy. Folks know that that we are facing across the city some cuts, and this is all the matter more why your voices are so important. So again, welcome. I hope you enjoy the event today. Had some coffee, had some bacon and eggs, as well as hopefully lunch later on, and really continue to just appreciate your partnership with Empower LA. So thank you so much. With that said, I will now introduce to you our board commissioner, Joy Atkinson.
Good morning, everybody, and I want to, on behalf of the board, neighborhood commissioners, welcome the budget advocates today to the budget day. Budgets aren't like, even though I am the vice chair of the commission, as a citizen of Los Angeles, the LA budget overwhelms me. So you have to trust people that you think will give you accurate information on how you should support or not support the budget. And that's what I depend on, listening to the budget advocates. I may not always agree, but I need at least get the information. I decided a long time ago that there are too many issues in this world, too many issues in Los Angeles to be able to keep up with everything. I'm an ordinary citizen. What do? I have to trust people to give me the right information. Now, I realize that being a budget advocate is not an easy task. There's a saying that I learned a long, long time ago, that you can please some of the people all the time, all the people sometime, but never all the people all the time. There's always conflict. There's going to always be disagreement, but we do the best we can. And I think that's what the budget advocates do. It's a very independent organization, which is great because the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners has no say-so over what the budget advocates do. So when anything goes wrong with the budget, we just blame it on the budget advocates. You know, I'm just joking. But they do a wonderful job, and I trust them so much, and they give us regular reports at the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, and I appreciate the information that I receive. And I think the board as a whole really respects the budget advocates. It's a difficult job. I don't understand it half the time. There's a whole lot of issues, but I appreciate what I do learn as a citizen. And not as a commissioner on the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, but just as a citizen. What are people telling me? How can I take it? And what do I understand? And I just want to say that I am just really happy as Vice Chair of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners to be able to come here today and to greet a wonderful group of people that really do a lot to contribute to the city of Los Angeles. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Allen. I am a member of Granada Hills North Neighborhood Council and a budget advocate. I was asked to come up here this brief interlude to quickly appreciate the kindness of the NCs. And the NCs you can see are listed up there. These are the NCs that have contributed this year. After 5 years of not having a in-person budget day, it's difficult to get restarted again, obviously. And as many people know, there's been some funding issues with the budget advocates over the years, and so it was very important that we do raise some funds for this, as it costs quite a bit of money. So those councils up here are the ones that provided funds for us this year, and without those funds, it would be very difficult to put this together. So thank you all. And I would like, if there are people from those councils, to stand up and appreciate and recognize them. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and let's hope that we can continue this process. Thank you.
Hi, it's me again. Okay. So I'm gonna hit a little bit of what Carmen hit, but that's okay. I'll take a different perspective. Section 909 of the city charter gives each neighborhood council the right to present to the mayor and the city council an annual list of priorities for the city early enough in the budgeting process that the input could be considered in a timely fashion. In 2003, while working on the 2004 to 2005 budget, Mayor Hahn asked each neighborhood council to identify 2 budget representatives to advise him on the budget. 55% of the neighborhood councils participated. Neighborhood Congress Budget Day was first held at the November 2003 Congress of Neighborhoods. Mayor Hahn asked neighborhood council attendees to identify and rank their top 5 service priorities. This was the first attempt at implementing Section 909 of the city charter. The budget representatives at Neighborhood Congress Budget Day refined the budget priorities, and each of the service regions elected 2 regional budget representatives from among their ranks to represent the region on budget matters. Budget representatives represented neighborhood councils. Regional budget representatives represented all of the neighborhood councils in their service region. This is the Budget Advocates' origin story. Today, neighborhood councils still elect or appoint 2 budget representatives. The budget representatives in each service region elect 3 regional budget representatives from their ranks, who are now called budget advocates. The budget advocates now operate independently from the mayor as part of the neighborhood council system. The budget advocates engage with neighborhood councils and their stakeholders to bring transparency to the city's budget process, engage with the neighborhood councils and their stakeholders on the city's financial condition, advocate for the neighborhood councils and their stakeholders with the city's elected officials and departments on services and budgetary issues. The budget advocates interview the department heads to learn about their thinking about their budgets. The stakeholder input from Budget Day's Regional Breakout Sessions is used to inform questions budget advocates ask the department heads. These meetings result in reports on each interviewed department's budget. We publish an annual white paper and departmental reports. The departmental reports and white paper make recommendations to the mayor and city council. A great number of our recommendations have been implemented, although not necessarily in the year we made them. The budget advocates visit the neighborhood council board and committee meetings to share information about the budget and to listen to neighborhood council concerns, providing another avenue of inputs to the mayor, department heads, and the city council. We hold budget-related town halls. In the last year, 93 neighborhood councils had members and stakeholders who registered for our events. In 2011, as Council President Paul Krikorian mentioned, he invited the budget advocates to speak about their findings to the Budget and Finance Committee, and we have done so ever since. And if you're interested in the history, you can look at Council File 11-0228. It is an honor and a privilege to present to the Budget and Finance Committee. This is an overview of our work. Our 2 biggest deliverables each year are the white paper that you can find on our website at budgetadvocates.org and Budget Day. The budget advocates need a lot of different skills. Understanding the budget is something you can learn. We need people who can write, edit, and are facile with social media. We can use art skills. Note-taking is highly prized. So setting appointments, not everybody can do this, and we need people who can. Sure, accounting and budgeting skills are good, but they're not entirely necessary. I was a software developer. I didn't know a thing about the city budget or how to read a budget document when I joined. Logic and detail are skills that are needed. You probably have the skills we need and don't even know it. I want to make sure you know that the meetings we have with department management are during working hours. This is when the people who work for the departments are available. Budget advocates need people who can take a couple hours off of work once or twice a year to attend departmental meetings. Thank you for caring about the budget. Thank you for joining us here today. Now I'd like to ask the budget advocates in the room to stand. I'd like to thank you all for your dedication and work. Can the budget representatives in the room join the budget advocates in standing? Thank you for participating.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for being here. I am, as you heard earlier, the other co-chair of the Budget Advocates, and it is my great pleasure now to introduce the city's controller, Kenneth Mejia. And I have seen him speak about the city budget in the past, and pay attention, hold on. It's always engaging, and he'll give you some ideas that maybe we can take forward to our neighbor councils as well as to the work of the budget advocates. So welcome, Controller Mejia, and thank you for being here.
Oh, the dogs are not here today. Good morning, everyone. All right. Oh, nice. I didn't realize it would be all the way up. Look at that dog. So that is, everyone asks, what does the dog have to do with anything? Because we used it when we ran and we use it in the office. If you pass by the bridge, you'll see like 10 corgis. But anyone know what another nickname is for the controller? The watchdog, exactly. Okay, it was funnier when we made it, but it's the watchdog. So hello everyone. My name is Kenneth Mejia. I am our 20th city controller. The city controller is the city's accountant, auditor, and paymaster. Before I became controller, I found out that there was really no one with a background in finance or accounting, and you're literally the city's accountant and auditor. And so when I found out that I was the first certified public accountant, it just made you realize, when people run for office, they run for office, and you don't really know what they're trying to do. And so I wanted to be the controller because I wanted to use my skills as a CPA and really show people what we're spending on our tax dollars in a way that's easy to understand and that's really accessible. Before I became controller, I had 11 years of finance and accounting experience. I worked for the big four auditing firms, and after that I worked for a couple of Fortune 500s, a hedge fund, some startups, and some private companies. And so my entire career before I became controller was literally doing finance and accounting. And I love it. I think finance and accounting is such a really foundational knowledge that you need to have, especially when you work in places like city government, because have you ever seen these documents that the city has? They're like 1,000 pages, and you're like, no one's gonna look through that. And so my job is I'm really good at taking data, a lot of data, and making it more accessible. So yeah, that's me. Go to the next slide, please. All right, so the fun stuff. I was thinking about, well, should I just come up here and be all nice and dandy and pretend like everything's fine? I'm like, no, my job is to be the city controller, to tell you the truth. How we see things, right? Other city leaders might see things differently, but for us, we like to tell it how it is. And so the city budget process is broken. We're not the best at budgeting, and we have created fiscal instability, and that's pretty much how we ended up here today. Is everyone aware that we're in a budget deficit? Okay, good. Y'all are the budget advocates. That was a test. And so, if you all know or don't know, 99% of the actual budget process meeting where they actually decide what goes in is happening behind closed doors, and it takes up 11 months. And in between that time and how the public can get involved, there's really not much influence that we've seen from the outside and how it goes. And I think one of the reasons is the city has never had an independent full-time team with financial expertise and knowledge to actually guide the city on long-term fiscal health and responsibility, right? A lot of our teams here are politically appointed, and politicians will just say, hey, this is what we want in our finances, and it might not be the best thing, which is how we ended up here, but we need to have that knowledge. We need a full-time team of experts who understand finances, and pretty much that's what we're seeing here. And the result of that, because it's closed door, because we have people leading this with no financial expertise or knowledge, we end up with this result where there is no long-term plan to improve services to meet the needs of diverse and changing communities, or improving and fixing our crumbling infrastructure, right? And so that's what we need. We need more of that that financial expertise and that aid in order to tell people the hard truth about the city's finances. And then we go to the next slide. If you could see here, this is the City of LA's proposed budget for next fiscal year. It's really tiny, but can you all see it? Like, it's so tiny that you can't even see it, right? But who wants to guess what's at the very top? Please. So it's about a 3.4 billion out of a 12.8 billion dollar proposed budget for next fiscal year. Who wants to guess what the bottom bars are? Tree trimming, street lights. Okay, so the smallest bar is Employee Relations Board, which they're estimated to get $800,000, and then the second lowest bar is the Youth Development Department. So they're estimated to get around 3 million. 3 million or so. Next slide, please. So here we talk about the city's overspending, because we got here for a reason, and we got here because of less than expected revenues, and we got here because of overspending. My office is in charge of a charter mandated responsibility of giving the city's annual forecast of revenue. And so what we notice is when we actually compare what we're estimated to receive in revenues at the end of the fiscal year, we were actually only $36 million off. We actually budgeted a little bit, 36 million over, whereas compared to what was actually adopted, we were off by over like 100 mil. Like we were just off. And you know, that's one of the reasons we estimated that revenues were going to be higher than expected. And so the second piece on how we got here is because we're overspending. And overspending means you have a budget and you're going over that budget. And so using the latest proposed budget and the data there, you could sort of see where we're over budget on, right? LAPD, liability payouts, LAFD, and other. So let's go to the next slide. And so because of this overspending that we had, and one thing I realized when it comes to overspending is the city doesn't really have a lot of controls in place when it comes to overspending in terms of certain departments. When it comes to police and fire, what we've noticed over the years, and even before there was a big wage increase, is that when it comes to police or fire or other sworn, there are no controls when they overspend. What we've noticed is basically sworn departments can overspend, and there's really no stopping it. You could go over 100 million like what we're seeing now, and pretty much that's just unfortunately the way it is. So when it comes to some of these bigger departments, there are no controls in place to stop that. There's no oversight to say, hey, well, we actually got to calm down the spending a little. But because what we've seen even before this wage increase is spending is way over budget when it comes to these departments. And the solution, what is the solution to this? The city's solution is to eliminate jobs, eliminate vacant positions that the city has been trying to fill. And during the proposed budget, the proposal was to eliminate over 2,000 positions. If you go to the next slide, what you'll see here is you'll see the departments that had the top overspending in red, and what you see in black are all the rest of the departments that had a budget surplus. So these are departments that a few overspent, and a few and most actually didn't overspend. And when you look at the previous slide, what you're seeing is the elimination of a lot of these jobs that these budget surplus departments have been trying to fill. So that's sort of how our solution is. It's, well, we're overspending 3 or 4 departments. In order to cover that, well, I got to cut everything else. And that really comes down to the philosophy. And if you've heard this, have you ever heard this, where people say a budget is a statement of values? Have you all heard of that? And that's where this comes in. This is where you figure out, well, what are our values, right? We're cutting 20 to 30 departments' budget. We're cutting all their positions that they've been trying to fill because we don't have financial controls in place to hone in on spending in a few departments. And that's sort of what is happening now, unfortunately. Even our office, 100% of our positions were basically cut or unfunded because of the way we finance and the way we budget. Next slide, please. And so one of the big solutions that we like to offer up is a 2-year budgeting plan. Now, of course, we still need to fix our solutions when we're in a budget deficit, but a 2-year budget can help us tremendously. Right now, we have a 1-year budget, and pretty much once this budget once it hits July, August, we're jumping into the next budget, and we really don't have that opportunity to really analyze and really see, well, have we accomplished much? And the answer is we really haven't in 1 year. And so we recommend, and we've always been advocating for a 2-year budget. It promotes longer term planning, slashes thousands of hours of repetitive staff work, creates space for upfront goal setting and public participation, and it allows you to have your second year to be devoted to adjustments and capital budgeting. You know, in here every quarter or so we have the financial status report and FSR report, but essentially we would just continue that process. Maybe you do it even more often. For me personally, my office is working on creating a monthly revenue and expense analysis to see how we're doing, because I think quarterly can be too long and often too late. And also, a 2-year budget does not require a charter change as well. So those are some of the benefits of a 2-year budget plan. Next. All right. Give me 1 second. So the road to long overdue reform. We do need a qualified and independent chief financial officer. Like I said, my experience before this, I've worked 11 years as a CPA. My boss literally for 11 years was a CFO, and they had financial expertise, knowledge, certifications, a background in this. And as I said earlier, we need someone who could actually guide this city and not just have someone up there in a position where you're just told what to do and not really given the hard truth, because that's how we ended up here in this fiscal mess. We also advocate for a 2-year budget cycle, a 5-year capital infrastructure plan, and expanding participatory budgeting. And, we just need to have a change in culture at City Hall where we're more transparent, honest, and accountable with the decisions that we make. During the budget process, I've learned that majority of the general managers, 40 of them, they can't speak up for themselves. If they speak up for themselves, they are appointed, so they could be fired. And these are the people who are leading our workforce and serving our people. Luckily for me, I'm elected. I'm a general manager as well for the entire accounting, auditing, but I can't get fired. I can only get fired by the people. But I could speak up for people, and that's one of the things that I want to do, is speak up for a lot of these departments who can't speak up for themselves, because if they do, then it might not end well for them. And so I hope today that you learned sort of an honest picture from our point of view as the city controller. I don't just come up here as some random person who ran for office, but I come up here as someone who is a CPA, who worked for the Big Four, who worked for CFOs, someone who worked on forecasts, someone who worked in accounting and finance my whole entire life. And the way I've seen the city do its finances is something that I've never seen before. And that's why I'm always sitting in my office. I'm like, what the heck is happening here? But, you know, as I told you before, this is how we got here. And we need to do something better than what we're doing now, because raise your hand if you think the status quo is not good enough. That's literally 99%. I'm a math person. I can see it. I saw a few people now that have 99. But you could tell the status quo is not working. And so I really, you know, I really look forward to working with the budget advocates. I appreciate also the budget advocates, your recommendations for my office as well. And I really appreciate the work that all the neighborhood councils do. Before I became a controller, I was part of the Wilshire Center Koreatown Neighborhood Council. So I understand the amount of work and time it takes, often a thankless position, often a time where you feel like you're putting all your effort into this and you feel like no one's listening to you. And so I really appreciate all the hard work that you guys all do. If y'all ever need anything, you know, just shoot me an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Controller Mejia, for being with us, and also thank you for holding your budget sessions. The budget advocates look forward to possibly working with you in joint partnership for any future budget type of events that you do. We're open to that, so thanks again. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you someone who's no stranger to the Budget Advocates Budget Day. When there was, I remember one year that the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee at the time, Krikorian, was unavailable. The vice chair filled in and did a very excellent job, very engaging. And now Councilmember Bob Blumenfield is chair of the Budget, Finance, and Innovation Committee. I'm sure innovation was put in at his initiative. So it's my pleasure now to welcome back to Budget Day, first time in person, but I think you were with us virtually as well. Councilmember Bob Blumenfield, who represents the 3rd District. Those of you from the Valley know. Tarzana, Reseda, Canoga Park, Woodland Hills, Warner Center, and Winnetka.
Glenn, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's really nice to see you all here in person. I think the last time we did this, we were virtual. I want to just start with just gratitude for the work that you all put in as volunteers, as people who care about our community. It warms my heart and it makes our city better. So first and foremost, thank you. So you asked me to come, and so as was mentioned, my name is Bob Blumenfield. I'm one of your city council members, one of the 15 folks who sits around this horseshoe. And I represent the West San Fernando Valley, and this is my 2nd year being the chair of the Budget Committee. And I've been on the Budget Committee for a number of years, and those of you who know me well know I was also, when I was in the State Assembly, I served as the budget chair there during some very difficult times, which is a very different process than it is here. And part of what you've asked me to do is talk a little bit about that process and not necessarily how it's different, but how it works, and then I'm also happy to take questions and really talk about anything that you want to talk about. It's a very different process in the state in the sense, in one way, in that it's very condensed. Statutorily, we have some requirements, like March 1st, the controller submits the budget. April 20th, the mayor must submit the budget to the council. June 1st, council must approve or modify that budget, and then the mayor has 5 days to either veto or line item veto, and then the council has 5 days after that. But that may seem pretty condensed, but when you actually back it out, in order for the council to submit by June 1st, we have to be able to vote on it twice in basically 2 weeks, because if there's any no votes, we then have to have a second reading. So then that cuts out of the 5-6 weeks that we have, that cuts out 2 weeks. And then you look at a year like this year, where the holidays were right in the beginning of that. We missed a week at the beginning, so we really only had a few short weeks to basically take the mayor's proposal and go through it line by line and figure out what changes we could make to it, how we could improve it, and essentially bring it forward in a way that the full council could support it. although I should say, I mean, this year in particular, this year is a little different in many respects than previous years, in that the biggest decision of this budget was not made during the budget process. The biggest decision of this budget was made earlier in the year when we negotiated the contracts with all the different unions. And started out with the police union, where when we as a council and the mayor made the decision to increase the police contracts, the payment, that really set in place a chain of events, because it's not just the police contract, which is very expensive, but all the other related contracts and the coalition of unions that needed to go up. And I don't shy away from that. I mean, that was a rational decision to make by this council and by the mayor, but it was a difficult one. It was rational in the sense, certainly when you look at the police department, back in Villaraigosa's time, the goal was to get to 10,000 officers, and that was, a decade or more ago. And even then, we were considered not having the same police per capita as most other big cities. And then, the last police chief was saying we needed to be somewhere around 12,000. But the numbers have been going down to the point that we're at 8,800 this year. Now, that when you're under policed like that in terms of the numbers of police, that creates dangerous situations where you have one officer in a car versus two, which can often lead to escalations and things like that nobody wants. So we decided as a city that we wanted to try to make sure that we could bring more, and this was a problem across the country. They were losing police officers. One way that we could do that is by trying to increase the pay. When you look at, and particularly recruitment and retention, because we were losing officers. We had about 60 officers per class. I mean, that normally would happen. We had less than 30. And more people were attriting, and the number of officers was going way down. And even with all the great alternative response stuff, which I'm very bullish on, it doesn't make up for it. So we were at the bottom of the pile in terms of recruits. A new recruit in Los Angeles would come in at big salary, but $74,000, but was compared to Burbank, Glendale, all the adjacent areas. We were at the bottom of that list, all the way up to Beverly Hills, which started at $125,000. And so part of this new contract was to make sure that the police would get in the middle of that pile, not at the bottom of that pile, to try to help with recruitment. Anyway, it was a decision that was made, and I'm happy to talk more about that, and I'll open it up to Q&A at some point. But it was a decision that, as I said, created a dynamic where all of a sudden you saw, once that contract was put in place, the spending obviously would go much more than was projected. And that essentially created a deficit. And when you combine that with the coalition of unions and other areas, which really did need raises. I mean, we want people who work in the city to be able to live in the city. And the way inflation had been the previous years, at very high rates, folks were, their actual salaries were worth much less than they were before. So all the unions that were up for their contracts were coming forward, and we had to decide we want to have some labor stability through the Olympics. That comes at a price, but what is that worth? We decided to make those contracts before the budget. That impacted the budget, along with a couple of other big factors. The big money from the feds that had been helping us stabilize from COVID was toggling off. The state revenues, and I could talk about that, are highly dependent on capital gains and income, had also toggled off. The state had been in surplus ever since I was the chair. When I left the state in 2013, well, when I started in 2008, they were almost on the brink of insolvency. We were able to, as in the state, we finally got to surplus. They'd been in surplus ever since up until the last couple of years, and because of the declining revenues, the state was then in major deficit, which impacted us here at the city because we get a lot of money from the state, and so a lot of their money was toggling off. So we were getting less federal money, less state money. Our revenue sources were flat this year, and then you combine that with the fact that we had to do all of the labor contracts, and we were looking at major deficits. Deficits that we had to solve. Now, the way that we solved it, and the way even when we did those contracts, back when we did those contracts, we actually voted at the same time to say we're gonna pay for these contracts essentially by eliminating vacant positions. And that is the least painful way to do it, but it doesn't mean it's without pain. Because a vacant position doesn't mean someone who's in a position, it means a position that hasn't been hired. And while that may seem just like a paper cut, it's in some cases it is a paper cut. If you have a position on the books that hasn't been filled for 5 years, well, chances are you don't need that position, and it's not going to hurt anybody to get rid of it. But that's not the case with all the positions. A lot of positions are needed, but it's just been slow to hire people, or those positions were part of the churn because you have a city this big, you're always having people leave and having to hire folks, and so when you look at the vacancy, there's going to be a certain amount of natural vacancy. So that was going to be the big way that we were going to solve. We're going to make serious cuts, but the biggest cuts were going to come from basically not hiring new folks and cutting positions that were on the books that were vacant. The other downside of doing those cuts meant that a lot of departments for years have been in the pattern and practice of using the vacancy rate as padding to cover expenses that they had. So a lot of departments like sanitation will have overtime expenses. Well, there was no line item really for the overtime that they had, so they would take it out of their vacancy rate. And a lot of other departments had used those vacancy rates to basically make their departments function. So by cutting the vacancy rate to the bone, we then make it more difficult for those departments to function. And it's going to be also, it bodes of a more difficult year to come because those departments don't have any cushion anymore. But bottom line, we went through that process and we were able to get, and we took them, and what the council does is we take the mayor's proposal, and especially in this case where the council and the mayor share priorities, we don't just rip it up and start again. We really just try to tweak that proposal. And when you actually look at the amount that gets tweaked, it's not that much, but it is very significant in terms of what it means. So the mayor put this proposal forward with a lot of difficult cuts, and some cuts that would have been really devastating for the city, like the street services. There was like 100 positions that were inadvertently would have actually resulted in people losing their jobs. And rec and parks, a lot of critical programs would have been, for our youth, would have been lost. And we found a way to fund some of the most critical programs like that, adding 100 new positions to street services, dealing with the rec and parks. Oh gosh, 5 minutes. Okay. Well, I also want to, I'm seeing that. I want to cut to questions too, because I want to make sure I answer whatever questions you have. I guess other kind of big points I just wanted to make, big picture. The budget is also, you have to look at it, it's a $13 billion budget, but 5.9 is direct appropriations. The other $7 billion is non-departmental appropriations, pensions, human resources, liabilities, service, and bonds. A lot of times we don't think about that aspect of it. It's particularly relevant when you look at like the police department. People talk about different numbers. Police department, their direct budget is $2 billion, but if you fully loaded with all the pensions, it's about $3 billion. So I wanted to talk about that. Also, just as teasers, but I'll move to Q&A. We need to look at revenues too. This year, we assumed the sewer revenues, which is special funds, which doesn't produce tax dollars, but special funds have to, or fees, they have to be used only to cover what the service is. So in the case of the sewer fund, it hadn't been changed in so long and our sewers were falling apart. We increased that sewer fund so that the sewers can be maintained. But there are a lot of other fees out there, like sanitation fee, which right now we subsidize to the tune of about $100 million. People like me who live in a single-family home at the moment versus folks who live in rental units because they don't have that subsidy. So there's a lot of issues on fees that we can look at and we can talk about, but I saw the high sign on the time, so I want to move straight to questions and really talk about whatever you want. Yes, go ahead, ma'am. Mm-hmm. I agree with you that the civil service system can certainly be reformed, but be also wary. One person's red tape is another person's accountability and protection. And city workers certainly have civil service protections, and many of those protections are hallmark of government service and allow folks who, one of the reasons that you have those protections is because a lot of times the private sector can offer more in the way of salary and other things, but what you get as a civil servant is you get a certain amount of stability, you get a certain amount of equity in terms of the work that you can do. So I wouldn't just throw away all of civil service by any means, but we have a real problem in terms of the hiring, and one of the things, and this is a big part of where the executive branch can come in and try to put forward changes in terms of the hiring practice. We need to and we added more money for personnel to be able to get through some of this, to sort what is civil service issues and what is just not having enough money to hire. And this was a bigger problem, of course, when we were hiring very fast, when we wanted to hire very fast and we couldn't hire as quickly. But a lot of the civil service stuff is going to have to come in charter. And in fact, it's one of the things we just put forward, and I'm on the government oversight committee, that we are putting forward a new charter commission, and that is one of the things that they're going to be charged with looking at, which is our civil service, because that's ultimately among the things that can be done, that have to be done by charter. Most of the civil service issues have to be done in that way. But there is going to be a charter commission, and neighborhood council members can be part of it. It's actually one of the things I made sure of just yesterday, that we were discussing that, and there was a prohibition on all elected officials, and I stood up and said, well, I don't think we mean to prohibit neighborhood council members from being on that commission, and made sure that was clear, so that neighborhood council members could be part of the upcoming charter commission. Yeah. Go ahead, ma'am.
Part of expediting housing development is to forgive the payment of fees and connections to utilities and other related expenses. Has the budget taken those impacts into account, and how will they be paid for?
I don't understand the question in terms of, you're saying part of, maybe you could repeat the question?
Part of the streamlining of development for land use is to forgive and omit the responsibility of developers to pay for connections to utilities and some other infrastructure improvements that normally accompany approvals of projects.
Well, before anything, DWP has very strict rules on fees, because, as I said, fees can only be used to cover the services that they're providing. So oftentimes they can't, like, we've tried to put in programs where, like, low income wouldn't have to pay certain fees, or DWP, and Prop 118 and some of the other propositions prevent us from doing that. So if there's going to be a fee that's waived, for example, for like a low income housing project, that has to be paid for either by the project itself in some way. So if there is a big grant for that project, that's where it comes from. So the budget doesn't actually have a line item for that, but most of the housing projects that we have, when we put money forward, if there is waiving of fees, it's because that fee is being accounted for in the underlying price. Go ahead, ma'am.
You had mentioned that we're in a deficit problem, and that's probably very true. But one of the big differences between budgeting for commercial industries and the city government is that if you work for a private company, you have zero-based budgeting, so that every year you've got to go back and justify down to employee one whether they should be continued or not. Why is that not considered a function of budgeting for government?
It's a great question. And it's funny, I mean, I've looked into a lot of those kinds of things. I moved in the state toward performance-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting is very, is counter in many ways to the city goals and values, because the idea of zero-based budgeting is basically you only budget things that are the maximum efficient. But in government, we're not just about efficiency, we're about values. So you may have a program that is serving senior meals, and it'll score very low on a zero-based budgeting, and a zero-based budgeting would say get rid of it. But from a values perspective, we say we don't want to get rid of it. But I think the lens that you're talking about of looking at things for efficiency and what I call performance-based budgeting makes sense in that, and it's one of the things that I instituted when I became the budget chair, was to have every department not only talk about in their departmental letters what they want, because a lot of I didn't really get into it, but a lot of what the departments do is after the mayor has their budget, they then write letters to the budget committee saying, well, we got this from the mayor, but we want this, this, and this, and we didn't get enough of this, we didn't get enough of that. And I always ask them in the budget letter, to both frame their asks in terms of performance metrics, in terms of equity, and in terms of values, so that we can see that whole spectrum. So the idea of zero-based budgeting in a business that is just about selling widgets makes a lot of sense, but in a government where we're really talking about services for people, and it may be more efficient to do, tree trimming versus, filling potholes. We want to make sure that we're doing both what's efficient and what serves our values. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Teresa Torrance. I'm with the Neighborhood Council of Westchester Playa. Per Controller Mejia's comments and concerns and recommendations on the city budget process, are there any efforts being made based on his recommendations to improve the budget process? And if so, can you explain? And if not, can you let us know why not?
So what was the first part of the question about
If you are making any efforts with respect to the recommendations made by the controller on improving the city budgeting process?
Yeah, well, some of the recommendations we're doing, the capital expenditure, he talked about a long-term plan, something I've always advocated for. We've been moving toward a 5-year outlook on capital, but actually getting a capital outlook plan makes a lot of sense to me. The 2-year budgeting is an interesting idea. It's one that I've advocated for in the past, but I also want to be clear that it's not the panacea that it may be made out to be. I think I'm a fan of 2-year budgeting in the sense that if you do it right, your second year is all about oversight, which is something that we sorely lack. But it's wrong to think that we're going to have a 2-year budget, we're going to create a budget, set it and forget it, because budgets are based on projections. They're not based on how much money you have in and how you're going to spend it. They're based on how much money you think you're going to have, what the needs are going to be. So it's an evolving document. And the budget, even though we call it a 1-year budget, or if we move to a 2-year budget, the reality is it is a year-round budgeting process. We go through what's called an FSR, fiscal status report, every quarter, where we have to change that budget because of the changing reality of spending and revenues. And so we really, in that sense, we have a quarterly budget. We do a formal quarterly action every quarter, changing that budget. If we went to a 2-year budget, we'd still have to do that. We'd have to do that probably even more, because the projections that you make on a 1-year are very difficult and prove wildly inaccurate. And if you make a projection on a 2-year, it'll be even more inaccurate. That being said, I'm still a fan of the idea of trying to move, the bulk of the budget process to a 2-year thing, and have talked with the mayor about it, and we're talking about putting together a whole reform thing this summer where we would look at consolidating departments and how that would all work. I wanted to do it before this budget process, but there wasn't time. So I'm, as a relatively new chair of the committee, I'm all for trying to make those changes, and if some of those changes require charter, trying to get the new charter commission to look at some of those as we go. I'll go to this side of the room now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Councilman Blumenfeld. My name is Gary Fordyce. I'm with the North Hills West Neighborhood Council, and at least up through today, a several-year budget advocate. You've already addressed the risks and dangers of our minimized police force, not only a risk to the community, but it probably invites a lot of lawsuits against the city, so it's going to be very costly, I would believe. But you've already addressed that. My other concern is what is happening to our city services. We're losing 2,000 staffing positions, which are departments were already depleted because of furloughs and so on by Mayor Garcetti during COVID. And now it just continues on. And with the mayor's focus on homeless and minimization of city services, I guess I'd like you to address that. And I'm also very concerned about, in conjunction with that, whether it be the state or the cities mandating that retired folks on a fixed income trying to rent a room to survive are now responsible for total care of a tenant who doesn't have to pay rent, and also apartment owners. And the city who mandates this and a state who mandates this are not taking responsibility that if they're going to mandate it, then don't hang that expense on the homeowner and the apartment owner. And the single mom is also having issues with renting a room trying to survive. So I put a lot on that. So thank you, Councilman.
Yeah, no, you asked a lot of different issues are in your. I mean, first you talked about the diminishment of services, and that's very real and it's something we should be concerned about, which is this budget. You know, I don't want to put lipstick on it because it's a very difficult budget. It's balanced. We were able to make the cuts that were needed, but it means that at best we're keeping services flat. We're not actually able to keep up with the increasing need, which is a problem because even this last year, a lot of needs went unmet. I mean, the original budget as proposed put our tree trimming on a 17-year cycle. We were able to get that down to 12, but that's terrible. I mean, the tree trimming should be on a 4 to 5 year cycle, both just for the not just the aesthetic, but for liability reasons. Those trees fall down. For cost reasons, those trees that are not trimmed, tend to buckle up the sidewalks more. All sorts of things like that. That a lot of times when you don't provide the service, it's penny wise and pound foolish. So we need to get back into that place. Now that we've stabilized our workforce, we need to really focus on our capital infrastructure even more. And we also need to figure out how to do things differently. You talked about civil service, but there are other things. There are a lot of ways that we can be more efficient as a city. And that's something, I've always wanted to lean in on and do lean in on. And technology, AI is a great thing, but a scary thing in terms of people and services. But there's actually a lot of things we can leverage with that to do more with less, which is how we have to deal with the service issue until we can grow our city over time and really focus on increasing the services. And in terms of you touched on another issue, which is a big issue really outside of the budget process, but is one that I know it sounds like you're a housing provider, someone who is a landlord, and you mentioned both of the difficulty, especially with COVID, that the burdens that have been put on housing providers, but also the burdens that have been put on renters over these last years as rent has gone out of control. People can't afford to live in the city, and that's a huge problem. But we did during COVID put a lot of that on the backs of the housing providers, and their costs are going up, as you mentioned, sometimes 30-40%. We don't allow in our RSOs to be able to do full cost recovery on the increasing price of utilities and all of the other inputs that go into it. So something's got to give, and you don't want to push out all of the the mom and pop housing providers that you're talking about, because then you're going to end up with the Blackstones of the world that really don't have any care about the renters. So there is a balancing act. I've always tried to find that balance and to understand the needs of the folks who are most vulnerable, but also to recognize that we can't take that problem and just put it on the backs of one group or another group. We need to figure out how to help people across the board. But it is a complicated and issue that requires a lot of balancing. And sir, go ahead, right in front of, yeah, you sir. And Glenn, I'm happy to take as many questions, or you guys tell me your timing. I don't want to eat into your time, but I'm here all day. Whatever you want.
I'll try to make it as concise as possible. My name is Gabriel Avalar. I'm with the Panorama City Neighborhood Council, also budget representative. And we've mentioned the deficit issue that we were having, and some of the things that are being done to, kind of rectify that. One of them being, the hiring freeze and cutting certain positions. And out of the general traditional ways of the city raising money from the state, from the federal government, and from taxes and tickets and things like that, what are some of the ways that we could be proactive and to raise, funds for the city? And if there are any programs that are already in place that do that to, generate income besides those other methods? Does that make sense, to kind of bolster the local economies, things like that? So if there are any programs that are already being done, or what actions are being taken in that, and being more proactive in raising funds besides the conventional ways we rely on.
Yeah, I guess it also depends on what you consider the conventional ways. Obviously, taxes is the most conventional. There's another way. I mean, you can get more revenue by increasing taxes, but nobody likes that. Of course, if you figure out ways to grow the pie, through economic development, that's a big part of it, because you look at where we get our taxes. If we increase tourism, we get more money in the TOT tax. So how do we do that? We bring in things like the Olympics. We bring in things like the World Cup. We bring in major events, which is something that we've been actually pretty good at these last couple of years. We have a whole bunch of really exciting things that are happening. Now, you need to manage it in the right way so that it actually becomes a revenue generator and not a revenue loss. Los Angeles is one of the few cities historically that's ever actually benefited from the Olympics. In '84, we actually, changed the dynamic of how the Olympics work and pulled a profit that went to a nonprofit that has been benefiting the city ever since. The LA 84 Foundation still to this day subsidizes youth programs in the city of Los Angeles. So that's one way, is figure out how to bring in tourism, how to promote the businesses that we have here through things like import-export. I always tell folks, and I do a number of import-export seminars in my district every year with the port and other folks, because most businesses think of their customers as the folks who live in their area. Well, there's a whole world of customers when you actually start importing and exporting. And we actually, Los Angeles, are a major manufacturer, and we can really be exporting not just our ideas and movies and great things like that, but also our products. So that's another creative way to do it. Fees, and which is conventional, not conventional. Fees don't actually bring in revenue to the city, but they do if they are removing a subsidy. Like I mentioned, there's the trash fee out there. It's controversial, but if we were to make our home trash actually cost neutral and have the fee cover what it costs, that would be $100 million that would come to the general fund of the city to fund streets and sidewalks and all these other critical city needs and senior programs and youth programs. So there's those kinds of things. And then there's economic development in terms of really trying to grow areas in a positive way. In my district, I have a number of initiatives, like my Reseda Rising initiative, where we've directed over $100 million into Reseda to do catalytic projects that are helping grow the economy. So there's things like that. And then there's also, when you think about growth, there's, one of the big tools the city has is our planning powers, and how we go about streamlining development in a way that protects communities, protects, doesn't enable, gentrification in certain ways, but also allows for development. One good example of that is in the Warner Center area in my district. The fastest growing part of the city of Los Angeles is the Warner Center, and we have what's called the Warner Center Specific Plan, which created one EIR for this area, about 2 square miles, that when new projects come in, instead of going through the normal development process where they have to have their own EIR, they have an EIR that attaches to the master EIR, and that's created entitlements that normally would take years that take months or weeks. And so those things like that are non-traditional ways to make the city. There are things that the city can't do. We can't land bank by statute, or try to make money by purchasing or speculating. Some people propose things like that. There are limitations both from a statutory perspective and sort of from a ethics perspective as a city that we're not in the business of making money, but we're in the business of serving people, and we can do things that will enhance our revenues, and it's very important to think about that side of the equation as well. So good. In the back, ma'am, go ahead. What's that? Oh, okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing, Bob. I just wanted to ask about the motions to light up City Hall at 4.
By the way, I didn't call on you. I called on the other woman because you typically disrupt meetings, so that's why I didn't call on you. But go ahead.
She wanted my question to be asked, so she
go
gave me
ahead. Go ahead. No, I specifically didn't call on you because you come to every council meeting, you sing and you disrupt and you cause issues. But I'm happy to talk to you at any time about issues, and I'm happy to
pay every cent of the cost of running meetings. So I was just wondering, since you're chair of the budget committee, would you consider levying a moratorium on symbolic motions and things like lighting up City Hall that the public has expressed a desire to cut out, considering we are in a budget deficit? Would you consider putting a nix on the symbolic things to dedicate those funds, even if it's just a little bit, to show that you're serious about taking care of the deficit? And I didn't mean to disrupt. That was just a question, and I'd like to apologize for that awkward moment.
It's okay. Thank you for asking an actual question, and I appreciate that. In terms of the symbolism of I don't know why it costs $400 to change the lights, but that's what we're told that it costs. But I think symbolism sometimes is important, and when we light up the City Hall on Pride Day, or when we light up the City Hall, when Moms Against Gun Violence or MAD Against Drunk Driving comes in and we light it up in those colors and people get outside, that actually has a value as well. And I think the value of that exceeds the $400 when you look at this city, $13 billion city, and whether we can, as a city, make certain gestures. Yes, we're flying the pride flag right now. Yes, it costs somebody money to put that flag up and take it down. Yes, when we light up the city in pride colors, or that has a little bit of a cost, but it also has a value. So I agree with the premise of your question, which is that we should be watching our pennies, not just our big dollars. But I don't think that symbolism has no value. I think that certain things that are important, and we can talk about, is there a way to make it cheaper? That they went to LED lights. It used to cost more to light up the city when they had the gels years ago, and they would light up the City Hall, and they'd actually have to hire multiple people to go out and put the gels over the lights, and they would do that for years. And then we spent a bunch of money and got LEDs, and so now it's just a guy who basically goes and changes things. Doesn't seem like it should cost $400, but it's a small price to pay for the value that we get out of that. And when we take any other questions, I'm happy to. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Blumenfield. We do have some other items on the agenda. I said we would be happy to take any unanswered questions if you want to email them to us. You can actually email directly at Councilmember Bloomfield's office. But if you wanted to email Budget Advocates, labudgetadvocates@gmail.com, we'd be happy to forward them on. Also, if you had any particular issues or concerns, we will have breakout sessions after our panel, and we urge you to bring those up during the breakout session, which we'll talk about in just a bit. I want to just before I introduce the next speaker, I wanted to just mention a few things. Every year we try to have at Budget Day all of the elected as well as appointed, I guess you would say, folks who touch the budget. And clearly, as you've heard earlier this morning, the mayor is one of the key players in that process. And I just want everyone to know that Mayor Karen Bass was invited for Budget Day. We know this is a busy day, a busy weekend, and a busy week. And we didn't know at the time that President Biden would be in town. So, we planned starting 6 months ago. But I want everyone to know that Mayor Bass was invited. We do have folks from her office who will be participating in the panel, and we will be inviting her for next year's Budget Day. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing is that I just want to give a shout out to ITA, Council Audio, for everything that you're doing for the screens, the sound system, etc. We appreciate that. Okay, so for our final portion of this plenary session, every year for the past several years, we have invited someone who is a budget advocate, who is a new budget advocate, to share for a few minutes their experience as being a new budget advocate. And the reason that we feel this is maybe helpful is that some of you as budget representatives might be considering in the breakout sessions running to be a budget advocate for the first time, and so maybe hearing some thoughts from a new budget advocate from the past year might be helpful to you. So with that, I'd like to introduce one of our newest budget advocates from last year, Lionel Morris from the Sun Valley Area Neighborhood Council.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our very first budget day in 5 years. My name is Lionel Morris from the Sun Valley Area Neighborhood Council and a budget advocate for Region 1. I'd like to thank Cindy and Norma for showing up, and thank you, Glenn and Kay, for leading this budget day. Thank you so much for Council Member Bob Bloomfield and Kenneth Mejia for coming here. This is my first time being a budget advocate, and I got to learn so much about the city's budget process, the finances, got to engage with neighborhood councils, talk to community members, learn about their experiences, their concerns about the city's budget, and bringing it back to our council, our leadership co-chairs, Glenn and Kay, and sharing information with neighborhood councils about local politics, civics, engagement, because I believe that democracy needs to be heard. I believe that civic engagement is very important, that neighborhood councils work with community members and talk to one another, engage with one another, and talk to city council, rally the people, and to express our concerns and in any way possible, because that's how democracy functions. It's the direct action with the community, with the stakeholders, and to bring it to our local elected officials and to understand what's going on of the city's budget crisis, because as Ken Mejia and Bob Bloomfield stated, we are at a budget crisis and we need to do what we can to preserve city services because we are impacted, and it's very important that we make sure that the people are engaged and that we continue to engage, and I learned so much, and it's very informative, very educational, and I encourage everyone who is interested in being a budget advocate to run for election. You get to learn so much about budgeting, finances, statistics, charts, and it's really fun, it's really fascinating, and I got to learn so much, and it's a lot of work, but it can be done, and I just want to thank for everyone for coming here, and and I hope that we could continue having Budget Day every year, and it's very exciting to see so many people engaging with us. And I'd like to thank our bond commissioners, Carmen Chang, the new general manager, Vanessa Serrano for coming here, Kate Kegel for coming here. I would like to thank our audience and everyone else for coming. It's really meaningful. It's really rewarding to see everybody engage and to network with one another and to engage, because civic engagement is very important to me. And so I hope that we all could work together. Just want to say thank you, everyone, and for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. I'm losing my voice. So thank you, Lionel. We're going to have our panel discussion now on the topic of who's doing the work. And so Kate Kegel from Spectrum One News is going to moderate. We have James Finney Conlon, who is from the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, and Matt Hale, Deputy Mayor for the budget, Rick Cole for the Chief Deputy Controller, I know all these things, and Matt Szabo, the City Administrative Officer. So please welcome them.
Good morning. I'm just going to give everyone a chance to sit down. And thank you so much to the budget advocates for having me. I am Kate Kegel. I'm an anchor and reporter at Spectrum News 1. If you're not familiar, we're Channel 1 on cable. If you're a Spectrum subscriber, and if you have internet through Spectrum, you can also get our news app. And our newsroom was launched in 2018, so I was a founding member of the newsroom with the idea of replicating the great work that our sister station, New York One in New York, does for that community, bringing that kind of journalism here to Southern California. And we really launched with a focus on covering neighborhood issues, civics, the kinds of stories that we weren't seeing on the other broadcast channels. We called it hyper-local news. So those of you who are neighborhood councils have been a huge part of our storytelling. And whenever we have a new reporter start, I always tell them, go to the neighborhood councils. These are the folks who are dealing with the issues on the ground, who are involved in their community, and who can really speak to the hearts, minds, and issues of what's happening in Los Angeles. So thank you all for your participation and working with us. And it's really exciting to be here for Budget Day, especially because this is the first year back in person, but also because the city right now is at such an inflection point. We've heard a lot about the budget deficit, the cuts that are being made, but also the promises of charter reform and what's happening in the city right now, that this is really an opportunity to solve some of these long-term issues. And we couldn't have a better panel than we have today with different stakeholders and different perspectives on what's happening. So there's me. I've introduced myself. I want to give the panel a chance to introduce themselves. Let's start with CAO Matt Szabo. Tell us a little bit about your history in the city and what keeps you fighting for Los Angeles.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Szabo, City Administrative Officer. A little bit about how I started in the city. My goodness, I've been working in the city for almost 24 years. I started in the Reardon administration in the tail end of the 1900s and have been working in and around the city since that time. I was appointed to lead the budget operations in the mayor's office in 2009 under Mayor Villaraigosa, right as everything in the city was falling apart during the Great Recession. So I've seen quite a bit. I've been CAO for the last almost 3 years and very happy to be here. What keeps me fighting for Los Angeles? Was that the question?
That's the question.
We have such a privilege to be part of local government. And I've been interested in government my whole life. You know, in elementary school, I knew I wanted to be part of the democratic process. And what I mean by such a privilege to work in local government is that it is the place that you can see the impact of the decisions that are made and the advocacy that you move forward immediately. It's when you think about local government, you walk outside and you look around, and pretty much everything you see is local government, from the trees to the sidewalks to the streets to the street lights, and it all impacts how we live, what kind of city we are, how we represent ourselves to the world. So that is a real privilege. And yes, we have challenges, but I've been around long enough to know that there are very few insurmountable challenges, if any at all. And if we just do the right things, focus, work hard, the city can achieve whatever it set out to achieve. So I'm happy to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Okay, great. Next we have Chief Deputy Controller Rick Cole. Same question, just give us a little bit about your background and what keeps you fighting for Los Angeles.
Well, like my friend Matt Szabo, I've been involved in public service my entire career. It's been my privilege, having been a city council member and mayor in Pasadena, having been a city manager in Azusa, Santa Monica, and Ventura, to be asked 3 times by folks in city government, by elected officials, to come and work for them. Richard Alatorre, when he was first elected to the city council as the first Latino in 25 years, asked me to come and be his senior deputy. Mayor Garcetti asked me to come and be his deputy mayor for budget and innovation. And on the night of the election, Kenneth Mejia asked me if I would come to City Hall and bring the experience that I have throughout Southern California in public service back to the city of Los Angeles. Why I accepted Kenneth's request is because although I'm a Southern Californian and I've lived in Los Angeles, I've lived in Ventura, I've lived in Azusa, I've lived in Pasadena, Los Angeles is the human and economic engine of Southern California. And what happens here matters not just to the 4 million people who live in the city, it matters to the 20 million people who live in Southern California. I was actually born, although I grew up here, I was born in Detroit. And in Detroit, the suburbs celebrated the decline of Detroit because they thought, well, all those jobs and upwardly mobile people will come out and live in our places. It was a tragic short-sightedness based largely on racism. They felt that the decline of the center city would be to their benefit. No suburbs benefit unless we all benefit. And so the fate of Southern California, which is part of the 5th largest economy in the world, our state, is really important, not just to all of you, but to everyone surrounding the city of Los Angeles. The world is coming in 4 years, and we have a story to tell.
Well, and Rick's giving a very abbreviated version of his resume because he's also a former city manager for Santa Monica, and congratulations, you're back on the city council in Pasadena. So I hope during this discussion you can speak to the way LA does budgeting in comparison to other cities and what maybe LA can learn from what other places are doing. But I also want to introduce Deputy Mayor Matt Hale. Please talk a little bit about your background and what keeps you fighting for Los Angeles.
So, good morning, and for those of you who I've known for a long time, I'm the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocates. It's good to see you again and engage with you in this new role. I've been with the city since December of 2009, and from 2012 until 2022, I ran the Council Budget and Finance Committee working for Councilmember Paul Krikorian. I left to take a role as the Director of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs at LADWP, and then was brought into the Mayor's office around November of last year. To work on the budget role from the mayor's office. Prior to that, I served as a staffer in the state legislature, so that was kind of where my DWP role meshed with the previous career. But I also have spent my entire career in public service. And what keeps me fighting for Los Angeles, in addition to everything that Rick said and everything that Matt said, is this is a hard time not just for the city, but I think it's a hard time politically for the entire country, for our entire state, and it's a really precarious sort of moment for democratic institutions. And I think that for those of us who are reasonable and want to see a better path out of the kind of darkness that we're in right now, we have to participate. And that's another benefit of the privilege that Matt spoke about, of serving in these roles and seeing the real world impact of your decisions and how those play out, so that we all can learn from the experience of public service and execute it in a way that empowers communities and makes them feel a part of the overall experience of government and not just a spectator.
Thank you so much. And we also have the Director of Civil and Human Rights Equity, Diamond James. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on this distinguished panel. Thank you. My name is Diamond James. I am the Director of the Office of Race and Equity at the Civil, Human Rights and Equity Department. We're just across the street in the LA Mall. But my journey to the city actually started some years ago. Been very honored to start as a recreation assistant as a teenager, so very grateful that the city can be a huge part of my life. Also, I have worked in the private sector. I was a journalist for many years at the Washington Post, and I'm really grateful to have come back to the city in 2018, serving in Mayor Garcetti's innovation team that was started by CAO Zabo. So it's very great for me to be here today, and what keeps me fighting really as a descendant of civil servants, especially African-American civil servants. My grandmother was the first Black Secretary of Chicago's police chief, so very grateful to have that legacy as we do equity and empowerment work in the LA Civil Rights Department.
All right, thank you so much. And then finally, we have James Finney-Conlon with the LA Chamber of Commerce. Welcome.
Thank you so much. When I was driving over here this morning and I saw on the 101 LA City Hall, I smiled because I felt like I was coming back, my home away from home. The officers down there, I used to see them every day. I would come into this building, and for me, this place, it represents a hope that we need to constantly fight for in democracy. It's a process where we always need to be pushing for increased accountability and for making sure that every single person's voice is heard and respected. My name is James Finney-Conlon, and I used to work in City Hall for Councilmember Bob Blumenfield. Even outside of working for him, he is a role model and a mentor to me of exemplifying humility and also of being okay sometimes explaining something and not a black and white answer, but really bringing nuance to the foreground. My family, also like yourself, I have civil servants in my family who inspired me from a young age. And since leaving City Hall to pursue other opportunities, I worked in youth development, doing government relations for at-risk youth. And I also served on the Small Business County Commission for LA County as vice chair. And most lately, I've been working as the senior policy manager for the LA Area Chamber, which is over 140 years old and has been a guiding hand with the LA City Council and other lawmakers to really try to grow jobs and make our region economically competitive. So what propels me and what really motivates me is helping our economy grow, making sure that equity is on the table, and also making sure that anyone who sees a door into a public chamber feels comfortable and empowered to be able to step in, take a seat, and make their voice heard.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. And it was great that we were able to already hear from City Controller Kenneth Mejia and Councilmember Bob Blumenfield, who he had called this a bare bones budget that we're facing this year, saying that city services will remain stagnant at best. We've already talked about how it's going to eliminate about 1,700 vacant positions. So I want to start this question with Matt Szabo. How did, in your point of view, as someone who's been here for 25 years, how did we get to this point going into this bare bones budget this year?
Well, not to oversimplify, but it's revenues and costs began to diverge. To have a balanced budget, you have to bring your expenditures in line with revenues. And what we're seeing is we are still in the echoes of COVID. And what I mean by that, I mean COVID in terms of the day-to-day crisis has been over for quite some time. But the impact that it had on the economy and the reverberations thereof, we are still feeling. And so when we went into the pandemic, of course everything stopped. It pulled back. No one was spending. Certainly our revenues dropped, et cetera, et cetera. That built up so much demand, and as you've read, in many cases, for the fortunate, they built up a lot of savings. There was also a lot of government money that was put into the economy. When everything opened back up, there was this flood, and that created, that fueled inflation. It created scarcity because there was so much demand and not enough supply, and that really fueled inflation that we haven't seen since the 80s. And as a result, the federal government has been trying to reduce that inflation, has been relatively successful in doing so by raising interest rates. So you have two issues that are putting downward pressure on the kinds of revenue that the city relies on, like business tax and sales tax and hotel tax and taxes on sales of property. So when you have high interest rates, the housing market, as it is now, just flatlines, right? When initially, when inflation went up, actually the city benefited from that because the general population had savings built up. They were still spending at the same level, and prices were higher, so we brought in more revenue. That is now having an impact, and so sales tax and business tax and hotel taxes flattened and are not growing at the same level that we would need to keep up with expenditures. At the same time, high interest rates, high inflation is putting upward pressure on wages, and you're seeing it everywhere. First, you saw it with LAUSD, then you saw it with certainly the Hollywood strikes, and in every other sector with the state government. And so we did face decisions as to whether or not we wanted to remain competitive from a wage perspective, and we did make the decision to starting with the police officers, and that was the first mover in this conversation, to pay our police officers competitively. That also triggered similar increases for civilians, and we did not have the revenue to keep up with those salary increases. So in order to balance the budget long term, we needed to reduce positions, and we were fortunate to have thousands of vacant positions. So the convergence of the upward pressure on wages, the downward pressure on revenue, is basically how we got to where we are today. Good news is, though, the mayor and the council did propose and adopt a responsible budget that will get us back on track.
Yeah, so now I want to bring in Deputy Mayor Hale, because this is the scenario that Mayor Bass is walking into. What can you tell us about the discussions that the mayor's team was having with the budget on how to make all these numbers work? Were you thinking about this ahead when you were doing those labor agreements, the kind of pressure it was going to put on other city services?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you cannot negotiate any one of those agreements in a vacuum and pretend like it doesn't have a cost while you're negotiating it. But there's also these sort of fundamental economic pressures of what's going on in labor organizing more broadly, and as an example, UPS drivers I think are soon to make over $200,000 a year. People cost a certain amount of money, and we have to pay them a certain amount of money in order to sustain a workforce that has competent and talented people. So when you sort of put the parameters around those negotiations and decide what you can afford, you walk in eyes wide open, but the direct consequence of that was those 1,700 vacancies that Matt referenced, and I think that you referenced, is they were not sustainable any longer. And so I know that those provide a lot of management flexibility to a number of department leaders and general managers. But at the end of the day, we can't have a budget that is based on a sort of unsustainable fact that those 1,700 positions were not ones that we could fill in the near future.
And this is where I want to bring in the City Controller's Office and Rick Cole, because I remember you talking to me years ago about these vacant positions. Can you really give us an idea of those vacancies? Were they meant to be left empty as kind of a cushion, we've heard a little bit, or are these jobs that the city really needed to have been filled that are now not going to be filled?
Well, without sounding too clever, Kate, the answer is yes, right? It was really a twofer in that sense. It was a cushion that allowed the budget to be artificially balanced. Because they were never fully funded. There was always a vacancy factor in the budget. So in theory, and I actually had an argument with one of the members of the finance committees when I was deputy mayor, who said, well, how come we're not hiring all these people? And I said, because they're not funded. He said, well, they're in the budget. They must be funded. They were not. So in one sense, it was a cushion. But we've artificially kept, it's almost like a Ponzi scheme in the sense of we're constantly overdrawing by having an artificially balanced budget, because those positions actually are needed. And unfortunately, it takes 6 to 9 months to fill a job in the city of Los Angeles. That was touched on earlier in the day. And so this was not sustainable. And that's the challenge, is the people up here are tremendously dedicated, intelligent, concerned folks who bring a lot of experience in the city of Los Angeles. But the system is broken. And they're doing the very best they can within a broken system. What we have to do if we're going to get out of this is fix the system.
Such a great segue to my next question, because I watched last year's panel and everyone was so excited for participatory budgeting. That was the buzzword last year, and this idea that the LA was actually going to go out into the community, into the neighborhoods, and ask people what they wanted to see from a city budget. And Diamond, what can you tell us about the last year? What has your office been working on?
Thank you. So I'm very excited that the community members were championing this program. LA Repair, which stands for Los Angeles Reforms for Equity and Public Acknowledgement of Institutional Racism. So a big mouthful there with that acronym, but it really was just that out of the leftover COVID money issued to us through the justice budget, Mayor Garcetti's justice budget from the fiscal year 21-22. So what we've been doing for the last year is we've had, I would say we've almost run the full process. We've had advisory committee members, a steering committee to help with the development of what are we wanting the guidelines to be for this type of program, which has been done in more than 7,000 cities worldwide based on the participatory budgeting projects model. So we're very fortunate here in the city to be having this pilot program, because it was one-time funding helping us work with 9 communities. They were based on community plan areas and also had the addition of Skid Row just for the acute emergencies that residents and community members of Skid Row face. So what we've been doing is we've had idea collection. We've collected about 1,400 ideas across the 9 zones. We had 2 phases just to be manageable to our very small department. We have about 5 staff that are dedicated to work on repair. Obviously, they have other items, equity and empowerment items in their portfolio, but truly we are a very small department at LA Civil Rights, but we have made great strides because from the 1,400 ideas, we've been able to have about 8,000 eligible ballots on our first and second cohorts. So that's really the totality of the 9 zones. So I'll just run them quickly so that everyone can know. They represent about 10 council districts. So there's Arleta Pacoima, Boyle Heights, as well as Mission Hills, Panorama City, North Hills. There's also Westlake, Harbor City, Wilmington, Harbor Gateway, as well as South LA, Southeast LA, and I feel like I may be missing one more, and also Skid Row. So we have 9 zones, and so those make up about 1.4 million residents who are affected, who can partake in the vote. And so you didn't have to live in these zones, but at least be, a community member who lived, worked, studied, or were a parent to someone who is a student in any of those zones. So we're just excited that we're able to distribute $8.5 million. And so we do know that from this funding, we have been able to touch or help about 21 community-based organizations who support this work day in, day out, even without the city grants to do this work in a number of service provider capacities. So we do know that we had 5 awardees for the first 3 zones, which were Boyle Heights, Southeast LA, as well as Mission Hills, Panorama City, North Hills. So those grantees, we are in the contracting process, and then this next year we'll begin spending time to work with them to implement their service projects, as well as onboard likely about maybe 14 or 15 new grantees that were from the 6 remaining zones where we just had the community vote this spring. So there's much robust activity from a very small team, and we really hoped for the $13.6 million that we did request for this LA Repair Program, as well as the Peace and Healing Center, a sister program that was under the umbrella of the Repair Innovation Fund. But we're just really grateful to do this work and thankful for our team of city leaders here who help to kind of adjudicate what funds are available and help us to think creatively. And hopefully after this year of implementation and the proof of concept, we'll be able to come back to the budget table to make some requests based on really great metrics from these programs.
And I want to ask James, with the LA Chamber, you have something like 1,400 members, and it has been, talk about coming out of COVID, then we had this year of strikes in Los Angeles, and what has really been a devastating year for people who work in the entertainment industry. I wonder what you're hearing from your members, because the strength of the local economy, of course, impacts the city budget.
That's right. Thank you for that question. If I'm picking up a coffee from a local cafe or going to a store, everywhere I go, I say, hey, how's business? I don't say, hey, I work at the chamber. I say, how are you doing? And pretty much everywhere I go, I hear people say, they're trying to be optimistic. They're saying, oh, I'm doing okay, hanging in there. But even in my own neighborhood, there's so many restaurants and businesses that cannot afford to keep staying in business in Los Angeles. And one thing that we hear a lot at the chamber is just the costs of doing business in Los Angeles, and also the struggle to stay competitive here is very difficult for a lot of our members. Our chamber is mostly made up of small businesses. I want to repeat that. Our chamber is mostly made up of small businesses. My parents, when I was growing up, they ran a small business that got bought out by a larger business. unfortunately. But small businesses really are the fabric of Los Angeles. And one thing that we've been doing as a chamber is working with the mayor's office, working with Deputy Mayor Rachel Freeman for Business and Economic Development on Executive Directive 4, which was the mayor's directive to streamline city processes to make it easier for small businesses to be able to have a fighting chance to remain and compete and do business and thrive in LA. Because when there's small businesses in LA, not only is it intrinsic to our identity, but also it puts more money into our neighborhoods, more money into families and our neighbors. So to answer your question, it's been hard, and we're trying to do a lot of advocacy around this horseshoe and also in every other level of government to really emphasize the importance of not forgetting small businesses, because they often don't have advocates. They can't afford it. So we represent the businesses that are members, and also more largely the community of small businesses that often do not have membership or a voice.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to ask Deputy Mayor Hale, what is the bottom line for residents of Los Angeles, eliminating these vacant positions, saying that city services will be stagnant? Is the mayor's office concerned that the everyday Angelino is going to feel the impact of this budget? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the most critical component of adopting a budget. I want to take a step. I do want to take a step back, though, and say this is a $12.8 billion budget. So it's not that there is no money going to anything in the city. It's just that what we are doing now, we will probably keep doing for some period of time, and it's unlikely we will be able to grow significant new programs in the city. That's the challenge that I think we're grappling with right now. But I think that there's a couple paths out. Chair Blumenfield mentioned the trash fee and offsetting $100 million of general fund expense that we are spending on just maintaining what sanitation does right now. That fee has not been adjusted since a new organics mandate went into place by the state legislature, which is a huge unfunded liability that the city incurs in order to avoid putting food waste in landfills. So if we are successful in revitalizing our economy and doing economic development, that's another path out of the sort of revenue decline that we're seeing, and ability increases the city's ability to revitalize our budget process as well. And then, the mayor announced during the State of the City address that we're also going to be doing a budget restructuring, and to me that means both a process and a revisiting of how we budget for our departments, and trying to figure out where we can find efficiencies, deduplicate functionality within departments, be a little bit more effective in the way that we deploy the staff that we do have, because these vacancies are likely not going to be coming back into the budget anytime soon. And so we need to sort of figure out how we can better structure the city's financial operation to respond to the growing needs of our residents for services.
Well, and to that end, we heard the recommendations from the city controller. So, Matt Szabo, one of the things that was recommended was a 2-year budget process. Why doesn't the city do that? And is there anything that prohibits the city from doing longer-term budget planning?
Sure. So I do want to say one thing first, if you don't mind, because this is a public forum, and I just want to be clear. The budget that was just adopted is not artificially balanced. The budget is actually balanced, and the reason that the budget is actually balanced, and we are on a pathway we are on a sustainable pathway, is precisely because the mayor and the council, who are responsible for the financial direction of the city, made the difficult decisions to make ongoing reductions. If we could have taken an easier path and not reduced positions and pretend that maybe we would have money to fund those positions sometime in the future, and had we done that, we would be facing almost $1 billion in cumulative deficits over the next 3 years. We had to make the difficult decision based on the reality of where our revenues are and our expenditures were going. As it relates to, in fact, adding back the positions without funding, not making the tough decisions, that would have broken the system. And the tough decisions that the mayor and the council made have been affirmed. We are under a microscope, as all of you know. We issue debt. We issue billions of dollars of debt. And so there are professionals that make a living in calling out unsound financial practices in cities and other entities. And we are constantly reviewed. And as a result of the budget, those agencies have reviewed our practices, have affirmed our practices as fiscally sound. In fact, we did receive even an upgrade, even though these are difficult financial times. Given what's happening in the economy, we were upgraded based on our sound financial practices. As it relates to a 2-year budget, I think there is a real opportunity to have a discussion there. Part of the problem that we have with a 1-year budget cycle is there is very limited time, limited to no time, to do deep evaluation of the base budget. Most of the conversations about each annual budget, as the advocates know, is about the margin, is about what are we going to add or not add. And then we're looking at the $7 billion below in the base, and there's very little evaluation there. 2-year budget, I agree with the controller on this, would offer that opportunity to evaluate what has been funded. There are challenges with that. We make revenue projections. If those revenue projections are off, it creates problems mid-year. It is difficult to make revenue projections for the next year, particularly when the economy is uncertain. It would be even more difficult to make 2-year revenue projections, but that's something that we can work out. The bottom line, though, is that the charter does require an annual budget, so that would require a charter change.
I'm going to let Rick respond for the Controller's Office.
Yeah, Matt, neither of us are an attorney. I think you can do an annual budget process, but you don't have to do the same annual budget process. So you don't need to change the charter to fundamentally eliminate the huge undertaking that we do every year. You can streamline the second year, as Kenneth outlined earlier in the day. Look, I made the point earlier deliberately that this is not about personalities. But we do have an artificially balanced budget in the sense that we've neglected our capital, right? If you don't maintain your streets, your sidewalks, your capital, sewer plants, etc., the budget may be balanced, but you're running up future costs that are going to come back to bite us. It's not because people here don't understand those realities. It's because we live in a largely politically driven system that isn't designed to have the long-term fiscal responsibility that allows us to have a truly balanced budget. And it's not, again, the fault of any of the people who sit here or any of the people who are sitting in this panel. It is the fault of a system that has not put the governance of our fiscal health first and foremost. And the result is it becomes a very political process that takes place behind closed doors. And the 4 million folks in the city of Los Angeles have to face up to that reality and realize that if we're going to have a long-term, really balanced budget that takes care of our infrastructure and invests in a really high-quality workforce, right? We have great people who work for this city, but the training budget is virtually zero except for the legally mandated kind of training that has to happen for police and fire, etc. We're not investing we're paying our people well, but we're not treating our people well. We're not giving them the opportunity, the empowerment to really make the best use of the resources we have. And it is really a systemic issue, and there's no short-term popular fix. But if we have a fiscal team that is focused not on the political agenda, but the administrative agenda, if we have a 2-year budget, if we have a genuine 5-year capital investment plan, those are steps long overdue toward giving the people up here the opportunity to be successful and have a truly balanced budget.
And I do want to bring in the politics, though, because everyone up here and Mayor Bass, they had to run for office, and the number one issue in the city of the campaign has been homelessness, or essentially the government's failed response to the crisis on our streets every day. So Deputy Mayor Hale, what has been the takeaway from the last year, particularly for Inside Safe and moving forward, and how did that play into the budget this year, given the shortfall?
So I think the single biggest categorical expense that was made in this budget was the continuation of the homeless emergency account, which is the primary source of funding for the Inside Safe program. So it is a combination of previous year, the 23-24 balance, plus $80 million in new funding from the general fund in the next fiscal year, 24-25, and $33 million in a state grant. We were able to pull together a $185 million account for the operation of the Inside Safe program. And that is a reduction from the $250 million that was allocated in the 23-24 budget. So like every other facet of the city, the mayor's office and operations that are out of the mayor's office took a reduction. So what that means is we're going to have to get the program to be a lot more efficient. The mayor has made the point that in an emergency response, which is how we consider Inside Safe and the HEA account, you first surge resources to respond to the emergency, to the crisis that's happening on the streets, and then you get into a sort of maintenance and recovery mode. So we are maintaining our urgency of resolving encampments and bringing people inside, but we are going to have to reduce the sort of per head cost of that program in order to continue expanding it. We're also going to need to bring it into conformance and compliance with some of the legal mandates of the LA Alliance settlement agreement that the city is a part of. And then additionally, and with regards to our interactions with the council, I think we're trying to figure out how to harmonize all of the previous efforts from the previous generation of leadership, from the previous mayor's administration, from previous council members, with the operations of Inside Safe, so that we can just be more efficient all the way around in our homeless response and continue responding to the crisis of getting people inside.
And Spectrum, we've been around for about 5 years at this point, 6 years, and we've already this is our third big city initiative around homelessness that we covered, starting with under Mayor Garcetti. There was a bridge home, which is where the city was actually building these shelters, which meant that was a long process. You had to go to the actual neighborhoods and get buy-in from them, then construct the shelter, then move people inside, and then we found people just pretty much stayed there. And then we had Project Room Key, which was the pandemic program that brought people into hotels. And now Inside Safe seems to be building on that by continuing to utilize hotel rooms, motel rooms that the city is paying for people to stay inside. Do we know how long that's going to be the model? These people who are moving into motel rooms, who are waiting indefinitely for a permanent apartment, maybe they have a voucher, they just haven't matched it with someone. Do they have any kind of guarantee for how long that they're going to actually be able to stay?
So that is one of the kind of core programmatic changes or milestones that we're trying to develop in the program is increasing that throughput from the motel stay out to whatever the permanent housing solution is for that person. Some of the folks that come inside may be suffering from a mental illness or a substance abuse challenge. We need support from the county in order to make sure that they can get into the right resource after their time at the motel to get into recovery. And some folks just need a little bit of breathing room to get themselves out of an economic rut. And the hotel stay affords them that ability to sort of get themselves back into the workforce and get themselves back into becoming a tenant, becoming a renter. And so we're going to be investing in housing navigation services for the next year in order to increase that throughput. We've already seen pretty good success, and I know that this number is going to sound like it's not successful, but when you compare it to everything else that's been done, but about 25 to 28% of the participants move into a permanent housing kind of resource. And so we are trying to leverage that success and build upon it and identify what the needs are, and work with the provider community to make sure that we continue to build on what's happened in the first year of the program. And just as a reminder, it has only been operating for about a year. So this is a completely whole cloth new program that the city stood up, and we are constantly learning and evolving that program to meet the needs of the population that we're serving.
Then I want to ask James from the Chamber of Commerce, we know from the homelessness count that we do every year that despite all these initiatives we've seen from government, that the problem continues to increase. Can you speak to the economic impact of failing to solve this issue?
It's incalculable. The moral costs and also the fiscal costs are incalculable. I really wish that I could grab an accountant and pull up a number, but between the costs it has on the justice system, the cost it has on families and mental health service providers, the cost it has on cities, it is incalculable. And it's also our common responsibility to be able to provide the services and to provide housing more often so people don't fall into homelessness in the first place, to be able to provide enough housing so people who want to work in this community and city can afford to live nearby. And also people who are in the foster care system or women and other folks who are being abused and have nowhere else to go. It's really incalculable, the cost that homelessness has.
Well, I know I'm getting the time's up sign, but I'm hoping Diamond can maybe end things on an optimistic note, because you've been out there talking to people about what they'd like to see the city fund, and I wonder if that presented any solutions, and that way we can end on that.
Thank you for that question. Yes, I would say that what we've learned, from our idea collection and also where people have uplifted their vote is, I would say a good amount are housing resources or rental assistance. So 2 of the first cohort grantees are actually were authorized to use their portion of their funding for the Boyle Heights community, especially the $775,000 on rental assistance. We're also seeing people voting and uplifting access to education and information, also community health and well-being. So one of the grantees for Mission Hills, Panorama City, North Hills, with the Cottonwood Urban Farm, a wonderful CBO there, and the Black Thumb Farm we'll be partnering, is going to be for a community garden space. So we're seeing a lot of actually asks and requests for things that LA Repair doesn't fund, so capital improvements, and so we have been sharing them with the CAO's Equity Performance Management Unit there. So we are keeping a log that even though Repair may not be able to support those capital projects, we are hearing the voice of the community as we do this work, especially as we know LA Civil Rights work under the leadership of General Manager Capri Maddox. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are seeing that people's interests are growing in participating in government, so we are more than happy to facilitate those spaces with our council partners who are very interested in this, as well as our city departments who want to make government space accessible. So we're just very grateful to do this work and continue fighting hate and discrimination because these are big value adds to the public. There are some small costs, as Councilmember Blumenfeld mentioned, but we do need to make people feel welcomed, to stand up to hate in all of our programs. So we're just grateful to hear the emphasis from the community members and continue doing that work with these wonderful city leaders beside me.
All right. Well, those folks interested in getting engaged, hopefully we'll see them in this room next year. Thank you all. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you all for listening. I think I turn it over to Glenn now. Is that right? All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks to the panel, to our moderator. Appreciate it very much. Wish you had more time, but you know we've got a lot to do in our 3 hours together. So, and as the closer, it's my job to get us out of here on time so we can get up to the breakout sessions. I just wanted to mention, it was mentioned earlier regarding the city charter section. I don't think the number was mentioned, 909. That's regarding the ability of neighborhood councils to provide our budget priorities to the mayor. And it was Mayor Hahn who was mayor when the new city charter came into place. The neighborhood councils started being certified in 2001, and he, as mayor at that time, had to figure out how do I comply with this charter section. And he did it a certain way, and then the torch was handed to Mayor Villaraigosa, and he did it his way, and of course then that torch was handed to Mayor Garcetti. But during that time, for a number of years, the budget advocates were staffed from the mayor's office. We met in the mayor's press room on the 3rd floor. And so at that time, for those who've been around a while, this was the mayor's budget day. And at some point, the mayor's staffer joined the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. We started meeting up at Department of Neighborhood Empowerment offices, and it became the Neighborhood Council budget day. It hasn't always been the same, it's evolved, but where we are now, you're part of that history that started back 4 mayors ago, and we now have Mayor Bass. And so we do invite you to participate in any number of ways. And as a neighborhood council board member or stakeholder, you can do so in your local community. Keep in mind a lot of the issues you deal with are the budget, and think about that as you prepare your agendas for your committees, your boards. And if you identify needs in your community, put those on the agenda. Get a position made by your neighborhood council and file a community impact statement on the budget. Every year, it's the first 2 numbers of the last 2 numbers of the year. So this upcoming budget's 24, and then the last 4 digits are the same, 0600. So this new budget is 24-0600, and file that community impact statement. Now the budget's adopted, I can't say a lot of people are looking there, but some people will. But also let the department know, let your council member know, let the mayor know, and let the budget advocates know. Because as we begin our work, starting as we do our breakout section and elect our new budget advocates, that work now starts for that next cycle. And you're part of that. We complement and we amplify the voices of the neighborhood councils. We're not here to take your place. We're here to broaden it and to strengthen it. So we rely on you for us to be able to do that. And so every month, think about, does this have a budget impact? And every month, if you're notifying the council and mayor, keep the budget advocates in the loop. And I want to give you one example. We heard from a number of neighborhood councils during the past several years as we were recovering from the COVID pandemic, where our budgets were cut down to $32,000 and other budgets were being restored, and neighborhood councils were contacting us. Why are the neighborhood council budgets not also being increased? We were $50,000 20 years ago. And so many of you took positions on it. The budget advocates took positions on it. When we met with Mayor Bass last year, and I'll tell you, it was Valentine's Day. Those of you know that'll be a date we spent Valentine's Day with Mayor Bass a year and a half ago. And we addressed this issue among many others with her, and her eyes lit up and she took notes. She did not know of that significant drop as far as the neighborhood councils. Now, it didn't translate into a recommendation in the budget last year or this year for an increase in our funding, but I will say that with the communications, you never know where that seed will germinate. And this year, Councilmember Marquise Harris Dawson planted that seed on the rollover issue. And so now, instead of just rolling over $10,000 for this year, you will be able to roll over all unexpended money for next fiscal year. So we can't say any one person, any one neighborhood council, the budget advocates, collectively we plant those seeds, collectively we put the pressure on, collectively some of you made requests to your council members and they said, you know, it'd be a lot easier if we just did it for everyone instead of having to do separate motions. So that's just one example. So what we're going to do now in this annual budget day, in person for the first time in 5 years, but even virtually in the past 4 years, is we will go to our breakout sessions. And those breakout sessions are grouped by regions, and I'll go through that quickly. And the purpose of the breakout sessions is to identify neighborhood concerns, city services, both we need more, maybe we need fewer, I don't know. Budget concerns, and of course, providing city services does take budget. So all of that, we're asking you all to just, there's not a wrong answer. We're putting out all ideas. We're putting them on a flip chart. We're writing them all down. We're sharing that then, all of those collectively with the budget advocates for our work ahead. So any subjects that are important to your communities, your neighbors, or your neighborhood council's been working on, be sure it gets on that flip chart so that we can include that with our work. Also, this is an even numbered year, so our terms as budget advocates are ending, and so we will be electing from each region the 3 new budget advocates. So just briefly, every neighborhood council has been asked to name 2 budget representatives. I hope you got that message. We've been sending it out forever and many times. Those 2 budget representatives are the 2 people eligible to be nominated for the budget advocate's position. For voting purposes, if a neighborhood council doesn't have both of their budget representatives appointed or present here today, for voting purposes, we want all neighborhood councils to be empowered, and so therefore the first alternate for the voting is the treasurer of the neighborhood council, and the second alternate is president, so they can vote, but they can't run to be budget advocates unless they're a budget representative. If we have any vacancies, we have a process to fill those, and if you need to get yourself or somebody named to be a budget representative, you can do that. Let us know, and they can be ready to go at such time as we have to fill any vacancies, or certainly the next time that there is this opportunity. So for most of the regions, we've paired them. So we have 2 regions together in the rooms, with 2 exceptions. And I'm going to go through those now so that if you'll just note it down if you need to. And I'm also going to ask the facilitator, if they're still in the room, to stand up and just wave so that folks know. Most of them are up on the 10th floor. So you'll go back to the elevators you came up on and continue on up to the 10th floor from the rotunda. There are 3 exceptions to that as well. So I'm going to go in numeric order. By the way, we're planning to start at 11:40 a.m. So everyone try to be there so we can start on time, because we do need to finish up by 12:30. You go a little bit longer, but we have another meeting scheduled for the new budget advocates shortly thereafter. So please try to, and you're welcome to communicate anytime if there wasn't enough time to get all the extended thoughts. If you want to extend and amplify those thoughts, you certainly can do that. So regions 1 and 2, that's the North Valley. We'll be up on the 10th floor, room 1050, 1050. And the facilitator will be Jennifer Goody, who's a current budget advocate. I don't know if Jennifer's in the room. She might be upstairs. Okay. And we do have Commissioner Waters here from that region. Thank you, Karen, for being here. For regions 3 and 4, that's the South Valley. That's going to be room 1060, 1060, next door, also 10th floor. The facilitator will be Tess Taylor, who's president of the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council. Tess is probably already up there. Okay. Regions 5 and 6. So, and by the way, these are the done service regions that I'm indicating. Okay. That's Central 1 and 2. So it's Hollywood, downtown, etc. That's in room 1070, 1070. And that facilitator will be Commissioner Debbie Wibby. Now those 3 rooms, when you get out on the 10th floor, you'll head towards the open doors, be to the west. But then these 3 rooms are to your left. Go down the hallway and just follow them along to your left. Signs, yes, good. Look for the signs. And by the way, we have some signs with QR codes that have this information here and also on the table in the rotunda, and signs on your way there. Regions 7 and 8 is the East and Northeast LA. That will be facilitated by current budget advocate Cheryl Ackerblum. I think she's already on her way there. That's in the Public Works room, room 350. So that's just past the rotunda. Leave this room, go past the rotunda, a little bit further and to your left. That's where the Public Works room is, room 7 and 8. Regions 9 and 10, that's South LA 1 and 2. They will be meeting here in council chambers. The facilitator is Daniel Perez. There he is. Thank you, Daniel. And Commissioner Joy Atkinson from the region is here. Thank you. All right, Region 11, it's by itself. West LA. Now this will be up on the 20th floor in the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment offices. There's a conference room there. So take the elevator to the 20th floor and you'll see the entrance to there and just go right in. It's just turn a little bit to the left, okay? Region 11's West LA area. And Region 12, the Harbor, is room 1040. So again, back on the 10th floor. That'll be facilitated by Commissioner Doug Eberhardt. Is he still in the room? Okay, well, he's probably finding his way up there. 10th floor there. Again, thank you all very much. And if you aren't able to join Budget Advocates as a budget advocate, just know there's a place for you as a budget rep or as an active neighborhood council board member. Thank you very much for attending Budget Day.